Hey there, it's Sarah from the No More Wasted Days podcast, and I'm coming at you today with a shorty episode. And I'm going to be talking all about the idea of a rock bottom, which is something that actually held me back from quitting drinking for the longest time. So it's a topic that I really like to talk to people about because when I chat with other people, they tell me similar things. When I kept looking at my drinking, I kept thinking, oh, it's not really a problem because I haven't had anything major happen to me. And I would tell myself, my drinking must be normal because I haven't lost my job. I haven't ruined my marriage. I haven't had my kids taken away or gotten a DUI. And if one of these things ever happens, I'll know it's time to quit. And that thinking just made it so I kept drinking and kept drinking. And all that time that I kept the drinking going, I was questioning my drinking. I kept thinking to myself things like, oh my gosh, I wake up with a hangover more often than not. I'm starting to have more blackouts than I used to have. I'm starting to think about drinking all the time. These are things that my sober brain was thinking about and telling me maybe it's time to take a break or maybe it's time to quit drinking. But then I would think, but I haven't hit a quote unquote rock bottom. And that idea kept me stuck in the drinking cycle. Now, the idea of the rock bottom actually comes from recovery models from decades ago. So some people are actually starting to say that the idea of a rock bottom is outdated. Now, for me, the idea of a rock bottom was something that I saw in pop culture, something that I saw in movies or I heard about in books. And it would always be brought to me in this idea of a huge turning point for people. Something happened with their drinking, and it was the big wake up call for them. It was the moment where they thought, this is my sign. And I was honestly waiting for a sign. I really did keep telling myself, I'm just going to wait for a quote unquote rock bottom. Then I'll know it's time. And this is something that has been really normalized as the sign for people to quit drinking. Now, I think that this actually isn't something we need to wait for anymore. And I think that a lot of people actually are starting to agree with me on this. When we talk about the idea of alcohol dependence, even that has evolved. Before, only the term alcoholic seemed to exist. And now we have terms like alcohol use disorder, which is called AUD. People talk about being alcohol free. There's all different modes of recovery out there for us now. So, as that all is evolving, of course, when you can quit drinking is evolving too. I had a lot of misconceptions when I was a drinker, and one of them was I had to be an alcoholic to quit drinking, and I knew I was an alcoholic if I had hit a rock bottom. Now we know that there's alcohol use disorder, and there is a huge spectrum within that disorder. And there are many shades between casual drinking and full-blown addiction. And we talk about things like gray area drinkers. And I think that having more ideas like that is so helpful to people who may be like me, sitting on the outside still, trying to figure out how to get into the world of sobriety and saying, well, I just don't know if I am a quote unquote alcoholic. The idea of waiting for catastrophe too can just lead to unnecessary harm in physical, emotional, and relational aspects of life. When people do ask me, oh, did you have a rock bottom moment? I always say, no, I didn't have a huge standout moment, but I had a lot of little moments. I had all these little signs, and because they were teeny tiny, I wasn't listening to them. But when I finally took a break from drinking, I was actually able to sit back and say, oh, those were my rock bottoms. And I think that that's something to think about too. A rock bottom doesn't have to be one huge moment. It might be a lot of little moments leading up to you saying, okay, enough is enough. I've got to make a change. For me, it was doing things like choosing to spend time with alcohol instead of spend time with my kids after work. It was the idea that I needed a glass of wine to unwind each day after work, or was the fact that I was always waking up at 3 a.m., panic stricken, and thinking to myself, oh my gosh, you did it again. You drank too much again. You've got to take some Advil. You got to chug some Gatorade so you're ready for your next day. I was living in a life that was a lot of chaos that other people maybe couldn't see because from the outside I looked okay and I hadn't hit this rock bottom that other people could see, but I had hit an inward rock bottom. And I also think that that is something that more people need to talk about. Now, I am forever grateful that I finally stopped waiting for that rock bottom to happen. And I decided to just dip my toe into the alcohol free world with a 30-day alcohol free challenge that I did on my own. I just set the goal for I'm going to quit drinking for 30 days and see what happens. My husband is actually the one who said, I'm going to take a break from drinking. And he told me early on, and I really think that I'm done with drinking. That scared me so bad, and I didn't want to go all in like that because drinking had really become a huge part of who I was. So for me, I had to just dip my toe in and say, okay, I'll go with him on this journey and I'll do it for 30 days. Now, one thing I also did with that 30 days is I told myself, I'll quit for 30 days because people who have a drinking problem can't quit for 30 days, which was another thing that I often saw in the movies where it was like, oh, if you're an alcoholic, then you can't just quit. It's something where you'd have to have a medical intervention, or you just can't keep yourself away from alcohol. You'll always be drawn back to it. So in my mind, I thought, oh, if I can quit drinking for 30 days, then I'm proving to myself that I don't have a problem and it's okay. But also during that time, I did a lot of work on myself and I did a lot of reflection on my drinking. And I'm so glad I went at it that way because it felt like, okay, at any point I could return back to my drinking life, which was somewhat comfortable to me because it's what I knew, but it's also not where I wanted to be anymore. I didn't want to have hangovers every single day anymore. I didn't want to have blackouts be a normal thing for me anymore. But I was really hoping that I could turn into a quote unquote normal drinker. And I know there's a lot of quote unquotes in this episode, but it is because there were just all these preconceived notions to me as someone who was really questioning my relationship with alcohol. So I went in with that 30 days. I thought to myself, if I can do this, we'll decide what's going to happen after those 30 days. And that idea helped me so much. It also made it so I was able to address my problematic drinking because, quite honestly, it was problematic. It was holding me back to living my fullest and happiest life, but I was able to address it before it started spiraling out of control, even more to that rock bottom moment. This is something that I really urge people to do when they are saying things like, I just don't know if it's a huge problem for me. I don't know if I need to quit drinking forever. I say, why don't you take a break and then you can decide after that break. So even if it's 5 days, 15 days, you can decide during that time, okay, while I wasn't drinking, this was better and this was better. For me, I started to see that my relationship with my husband was easier when I quit drinking. My productivity levels were much higher when I wasn't drinking. And I was just waking up feeling so much better. I was sleeping better. I had less anxiety finally, something I was really struggling with when I was a drinker. Now, all these things are going to be different for everybody. And also, these things can come back and be issues later on when you're on your alcohol free journey. But I really just started looking at those positive things that were happening when I was going on my 30-day break. And that really helped me too. Now, when I got to the end of my 30 days, I wasn't convinced that I was going to be totally done drinking still, but I knew I wasn't ready to go back to drinking. I wasn't cured, as I was telling myself yet. I knew I couldn't go back and moderate successfully yet. So I decided to keep going. And I also didn't want to put myself back into that position where I was waiting for a rock bottom again. And I really felt like after just the 30 days, that's where I was going to put myself very quickly. So I set my next goal at 60 days. I got there, and that's when I was really just starting to feel like, wow, I'm finally living the life I deserve. I'm finally living a life that I am worthy of, that I'm showing up for every single day. And if it wouldn't have been the small step of just saying, okay, I'm going to dip my toe in first, I wouldn't have gotten there. And if it wouldn't have been for me looking past the idea of a rock bottom, I wouldn't have got there either. If I would have kept waiting for a catastrophe and for someone to forcibly tell me it's time for you to quit drinking, it would have been so much harder. And I think when we strip the idea of rock bottom away and we just say, maybe drinking is making it so I can't live my fullest, best life, that idea starts going, okay, well, maybe I'll try it out without alcohol and start to see. So I want you to really think about this too. If you're someone where you're hearing me talk about the idea of a rock bottom and how I was waiting for that rock bottom early on, and you're going, I've had that conversation with myself. Then maybe it's just time to dip your toe in to say, okay, I've tried the drinking life. Now I want to try the not drinking life. And then I can see which way I like better. And I will tell you, it is so much easier when you go at it this way rather than waiting for that rock bottom where we're forcibly being told, like, this is what you have to do to quit drinking. Now you've gotten yourself into these issues and you have to make this choice. Make the choice for yourself, and you're going to feel so much more empowered on your alcohol free journey. And that's when it really does become that lifestyle. Now, I'm not saying that if you have hit a rock bottom or what people perceive as a rock bottom, that you can't also find empowerment on your alcohol free journey. That's not true at all. But I just think there is this huge power in it when we say, I'm going to make this shift for me, and it's going to be a super positive thing that I can do for myself. And then along with that, use all the tools that we talk about all the time on this podcast. If you're going to take a break from alcohol, start really getting out there and seeing what the effects of alcohol are on our mental and physical and emotional health, and really start working on your mindset through gratitudes and affirmations. And if you need help in that area, I'll put my 10 mantras in the show notes below, and you can go download those for free so you can start doing daily mantras or daily affirmations that I did early on in my alcohol-free journey that helped me feel empowered on my journey. This was really on my heart lately as I've been really thinking about what it was like in my early days and what were the signs for me telling me like, hey, it's time to make a change in your alcohol-free journey. And one thing I always felt was missing when I quit drinking was that rock bottom moment. And I just don't want you to feel like you need to wait for that either, because now 5 years into my alcohol-free journey, it's just silly to me that I was actually waiting for that, because my life is so much easier now without alcohol, and it just feels so much better without alcohol. And I want that for other people if it's something where they're having the back and forth like I was every single day. I really hope this episode was interesting to you, and I hope this idea really made you think a little bit about the idea of rock bottom and maybe that things are changing in the alcohol-free world and we're leaving some terms behind and we're finding empowerment in different areas on our alcohol-free journey. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the podcast and rate and review the podcast. It really does help us grow, and Heather and I appreciate it so much. And be sure to check out the link in the show notes and grab those 10 mantras, and also check out the link in the show notes for day makers and one-on-one coaching with Heather. All right, I'll be in your ear in the next episode.